History calls him Alexander the Great. But what if the word we should really be using is tyrant? What if the man who conquered most of the known world in 10 years was not a military genius, but an insecure son who killed everyone who could have stopped him? Alexander the Great is one of the most celebrated figures in all of history, conqueror of Persia, Egypt, Afghanistan, and the edges of India, dead at 32 years old. His father, Philip II of Macedon, built the greatest military machine Greece had ever seen. He did it through patience, skill, and loyalty to his people. He was a builder. Alexander was the son who inherited it all, and that changes everything about who he was. Because here is what we know about people who inherit greatness. They are haunted by it, always hearing whispers that what they have is not really theirs, always driven to prove that they deserve it. And that insecurity makes them dangerous. When Philip was assassinated in 336 BCE, Alexander was 20 years old. He took the throne immediately, and almost immediately the predictions you could make about him started coming true. Within months, rebellions broke out across Greece. Alexander moved with terrifying speed, crushing them one by one. Then he destroyed Thebes, not just conquered it, destroyed it. He massacred the men and enslaved the women. This was not military strategy. The Greeks had a tradition among themselves of not doing this to other Greek cities. Even Sparta, after defeating Athens in a long war, simply sent the Athenians home and told them to behave. Alexander blew that tradition apart. He wanted fear, not loyalty. His two greatest generals were Parmenion and Cleitus the Black. These were men his father had promoted, men who had earned their positions through years of hard work and real loyalty. Parmenion, the elder general, was almost certainly innocent when a conspiracy was uncovered in the army. His son confessed under torture. Confessions under torture mean nothing, but Alexander had Parmenion killed anyway. Why? Because Parmenion was more respected by the soldiers than Alexander was, and Alexander could not tolerate that. Cleitus the Black actually saved Alexander's life at the Battle of Granicus. A Persian commander was about to cut Alexander down. Cleitus rode in and cut off the Persian's arm. Alexander's response, years later, was to throw a spear at Cleitus during a drunken argument and kill him on the spot. The argument, Cleitus had said basically that Alexander's victories were built on his father's foundation, that it was Philip's army, Philip's strategy, Philip's men who won these wars. Alexander killed him for telling the truth. After conquering Persia, one of the largest empires in the world, Alexander marched his exhausted army into India. There was no strategic reason for this. There was no wealth worth the cost. They mutinied. They refused to go further. Alexander, furious, executed the leaders who spoke up. Then he punished the rest by forcing them to march home through a brutal desert that killed thousands of them through thirst and starvation. There is a scene in Egypt that reveals everything. After easily conquering Egypt, Alexander made a strange decision. He disappeared into the desert for weeks. He traveled to a remote temple dedicated to Zeus Ammon, the highest god in both Greek and Egyptian tradition, and he came back claiming that the oracle had told him Philip was not his real father. His true father was Zeus. He was the son of a god. From that point on, he expected his Macedonian soldiers to bow before him and kiss the ground, a Persian custom that Greeks found deeply offensive. The idea of a man claiming to be a god was not just arrogance, it was a rupture with everything his culture stood for. The soldiers hated it, his generals resented it, and slowly the army that had followed Alexander through the greatest conquests in history started to plot against him. He died in Babylon in 323 BCE. He was 32. The official cause was fever. The more likely story, supported by the circumstantial evidence, is that his generals poisoned him. They had reached the end of what they could endure. A man who conquered most of the known world in 10 years. That is real. The scale of it is almost impossible to comprehend. But here is what else is real. He killed the two men most responsible for those victories. He wiped out one of the great cities of the Greek world. He marched thousands of soldiers to their deaths for no strategic reason. He declared himself a god and demanded submission. Is that greatness? Or is that a very powerful, very insecure person with no one left to stop him? There is a useful question to ask about any leader. When they were at their peak, who had the freedom to tell them they were wrong? For Philip II, the answer was several people. He had a council. He had generals he respected. He was willing to negotiate. For Alexander, by the end, the answer was no one. He had killed or driven away every person who might have spoken an honest word to him. That is not what greatness looks like. That is what unchecked power does to a person who was never quite certain they deserved it. The conqueror of the world died alone, thousands of miles from home, surrounded by men, waiting for him